it's time to make a proper header tank. You may have seen from our last drifting video that the Ford plastic one lasted, I don't know, about 3 hours on track or something before it died. So I decided it's time to do this again. I admit to making a tank and getting it wrong. So this time I'm going to make it properly, and I'm going to go through in excruciating self-indulgent detail on how I do this. So I'll show you how we measure everything up, how we prep the aluminium sheet, what we're using, the TIG settings we're using, and hopefully from this you can see that you can do this at home as long as you've got a TIG that you can change the settings on to match ours, and we hope to turn out a nice professional job. It's Father's Day today. Leon is in quarantine again, so I'm here by myself. I have the whole day and I'm going to spend it in the workshop. I've got no time pressure, so I'm going to do an absolutely top level professional job on this, share all the information, and hopefully you can copy this at home if you wish to. So let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is make a rectangular box, obviously, and the easiest way to do this, I am using 3mm aluminium. I tried to make the previous one, although the box came out very nicely. I made that in 1.6 aluminium, and when I pressure tested it, even though it's got internal welded baffles in it, it turned into a balloon. So 1.5mm is too thin, it won't take 20 psi. 3mm, this is the daddy. So the first thing to do is just get on the guillotine and cut out 2 squares and put 2 90-degree bends in, and these are going to form the outside of our box. Now, the reason I've done it in 2 halves like this instead of just bending it all the way around is it's much easier to get a perfect rectangle putting 2 halves and welding it together. It's a bit more welding, yes. And the easiest way to get it is to do one and bend it at 90. This box I think is 5.5 by 4.5 inches, 10 inches wide. If you do one, get it bent at 90 degrees, you can do the other one, you can lay it into it, and this material thickness is 3mm, and if you look down the edge of one laid into the other, it should be exactly 3mm outside on each of these 2 edges. And if you do that and your bends are at 90 degrees, you're going to get yourself a perfect 90-degree box when you weld these together. So that's our starting point. Next job, we've got to clean them. For the first job, I'm just using a fine pad on the grinder here just to rub over these surfaces, maybe 1/2 inch away from where I'm going to be welding, and that cleans off the aluminium oxide and any glue and muck from the plastic protection film that was on there. The cleaner it is, the better welds we're going to get. Once I've done that on both parts, a bit of clean rag, and I'm using acetone here, and I'm wiping over those areas again. You'd be amazed at how much dirt that brings off. We've now got a clean surface. That's a good start. So these are going to be our welding jigs. We've got the rounded edge here, and what I'm going to do is clamp these with a rounded edge to where we're going to weld. These will make sure that these edges stay straight, and we can clamp everything up before we weld it, and that little relief there means you can get some heat into the plate without it being completely sucked into here. You'll notice here to do the outside corner, we actually haven't overlapped the joints, we've left them so we have an area that we can fill. So this is all clamped now, so we'll throw a few tacks on and we can get the clamps off and move them to the other side. I'm using a Miller Dynasty 200, or Dynasty if you're watching in America. We're set on AC, we have initial amps at 105, main amps at 105 as well, and I'll be using a foot pedal, balance at 60%, and the AC frequency at 130. I'm also using here a 26 torch, a 3/32 or 2.4mm electrode, and a number 8 gas cup. It seemed to go a lot better with a gas cup, and I'm using 8 litres a minute on the argon flow. So a couple of things here. I'm laying in the initial tacks. I'm not doing little small tacks, I'm doing about 1/2 inch, and I'm also not running the tacks right at the corners of the plates. You'll notice I'm about 1 inch in from the edge. This means there's just a good bit of area. You can let the heat build up, get it to the right temperature, get your pool going, and off you go. I'm tacking this in 3 places, so one near each end and one in the centre, and that should be rigid enough that we can then take off the clamps and the support bar at the back and be able to weld it without getting any distortion. Well, there we are, we've got tack welds on for the box, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these aluminium bars in there because they act as a heat sink and prevent warping and give something to clamp to. So what I'm going to do, you might have noticed I haven't tacked right at the corners, and the reason being I'll start a weld there and run it to that corner, because if you try and start it right on the corner, you risk just blowing the edge away. So I'm going to seam weld this, seam weld the other side of it, and then we can start looking at the inside of the tank. No, looking nice so far. Let's lay some beads. Now that's a tidy bit of welding, if I may say so myself. Well, we've got our tank, at least the square box section done. Run some nice welds down there, so I'm pretty happy with that. So the next job is, we need to make some baffles, because this tank has got to have different sections in it. So we need 2 inlets, which are the bleed pipes from our 2 pipes running forwards, so they can put air in. So they need to go at the top of the tank, because there'll be air with a bit of water. We need 1 outlet from here down the bottom somewhere, which is going to go down to the top of the radiator, which will allow air to go up and water to go down, depending which way it wants to flow. And we have the main pipe to the bottom of the radiator, which is also the fill line. That'll be a 21 or a 22 mil, I think it is, this thing here. And that needs to be at the bottom because that's the main fill line. But we need to baffle them, because what we don't want is the water sloshing around, and particularly this big outlet that's going to go at the front left hand side. We want to make sure that's always underwater as such. So the best way to do that is that I think we'll have the 2 inlets over here, and the one for the radiator. So we'll put a couple of baffles in here, so in effect the back end of the tank that we've got here will act as the reservoir for that feed down to there, and all the aerated water and the filler cap and stuff will be at this end of the tank. and we'll have a baffle between them as well to settle things down. So pretty simple. We're just going to weld some aluminium flat plates in there. I'll weld the bottom for the area that's going to go here. We need that to fill up, and we'll cut the corners off so it'll allow fluid to pass backwards and forwards but not slosh about too much. So pretty simple. We'll just lay it on the aluminium, draw around the inside with the Sharpie or a scriber, cut it on the guillotine, and get these welded in. So I think we'll make two. So with the baffles cut and the edges cleaned up, I can scribe around the inside of the box here. I've just set the verniers a third of the distance of the box, and then we know that we can get the baffle plates in nice and square. Once that's been scribed round, I can clamp some aluminium blocks on the inside that line up with those scribe marks that we put on, and then you can simply lay the baffle in against those aluminium blocks and it's at the right height. Easy. So I've got that baffle plate tacked in, and I'll weld round most of it now. You only need to do maybe 2/3 of it. You don't have to seam weld the whole thing. The only thing I've changed is I've put the shorty back cap on, and I've given a little bit more stick out on the electrode, just because it gives a little bit easier access when you're welding down there. The other thing is that your filler rod that I'm using is that it helps to curl it round on itself like this, so you can feed it in as you're going, because otherwise you're trying to feed it in effect beside the torch, and I don't know, whenever I do that I seem to end up with it touching on the torch and making a right mess. So obviously you want to try and keep the filler rod going in at 90 degrees to the torch angle. So that's it. We'll get this baffle welded in and turn it over and do the same on the other one. For the second baffle, you can't use aluminium blocks to mount it because you can't get into the back, so I just used 4 bits of aluminium welding wire bent around and hooked in the corners. That worked really nicely. So we can get the second baffle tacked in here, and then we can pull those bits of wire out, being aluminium, they're nice and soft. We've got our 4 tacks in there to hold the plate in place, and then rinse and repeat. Just weld around that one. Well, we've got the basics of our tank sorted out now, and the next job is not to weld the end plates on, as you think it might be. No! We've got to weld all of these fittings on. So I've got one for the radiator pipe to the bottom, the filler neck, a couple of 3/8 BSP fittings, so we can run a poly pipe between the two of them, so we can see what the water level is inside here. 2 fittings, 5/16 8mm, which are for the water pipe breathers, and 1 1/4 inch 6.3mm, which is for the top of the radiator bleed. Leon made these. He did extras when we did the ones for the others, so luckily I've got these in stock. The reason for putting all these into the tank now is quite simple. Now, the first thing, the filler neck, I've got a recess I've machined on the inside of that, and it means I can sit the filler neck into there, and actually I'm going to weld it on the inside rather than the outside, so it keeps the welds away from that thread. So that's the reason for that. And the next reason is that it means I can get all the swarf out, because if you weld the ends on the tank and then drill holes and start welding fittings in, you end up with a tank full of swarf and you can't get the swarf out. You'll see I've left all the corners clear, and that's for a good reason, so we can shake it out. So let's get this marked up, and we'll use the step drill, because step drills are much better for drilling sheet aluminium. And what I'm going to do is put the 2 holes in for these 2 and weld these on. These fittings, I'm not actually going to drill holes before I weld them on, because it's too easy to get them in the wrong place. So the best thing to do is to weld the fitting on and then use the fitting itself as a drill guide. So that's pretty simple. First job, this one here. So the first thing is to tack in these 3/8 BSP bungs that we're going to use for the level tube. So there's the first one tacked, tack the second one in, and once that's done we can turn the tank around into a good position and we can run our welds around there. And here's us just finishing off that, and that is a nice piece of welding, if I may say so myself. Pretty pleased with that. Onto the filler neck now, and as I said, I'm going to weld this from the inside because I machined the slight spigot. That's actually the old filler neck from the radiator, which of course we banked up when we changed over to a header tank setup. It makes a nice weld if you weld around the inside, and it means that it fits a bit closer on the outside because we're a bit stuck for height. There we are. With that done, I can do the angled radiator pipe that's the main fill line, and I cheat a bit here. I can never get these things to weld up on the seams to get the weld started holding something by hand. So if you just put a little dob of aluminium on the main part there, hold the two together, and then I can hold the part in the TIG torch, melt that blob, and the two parts will stick together. So when you're trying to do a three-handed job, you do it with 2 hands first and then another 2 hands afterwards. Works for me. There's probably a better way of doing it. So that's our main fill pipe welded on. That's looking pretty nice. And it's onto the 3 small spigots. So the 2 that go at the top here are the 2 bleeds from the main feed and return pipe to the back of the car. And the small one there that's going at the bottom, so it's always sat in fluid, is the one that goes to the top of the radiator. Well, you can see we've got all the fittings welded into the tank. That's all gone very nicely. Pretty happy with that. Some nice welds. And you saw that I welded the filler cap from the inside because that makes a nice weld of that. Last job, end caps. Our last job on the welding. We've still got to drill through these once we know that everything's okay. So we'll just measure up the end caps, get on the guillotine, cut those out, and again I'm going to do them slightly smaller than the overall outside dimension so we can weld into that V that it forms, and that should give us some nice weld beads like we've got down the sides here. We do like a good weld bead. So let's mark this up. You may be wondering what I'm doing with these two small plates. They're clearly far too small to work as end caps. And plus still, why am I putting a 90-degree bend in them? All will become clear. Yes, I've welded the 90-degree Bs on what will be the inside of these end plates because they're going to provide, in effect, the rib to prevent any sort of risk of it ballooning out. You won't be able to see these when it's assembled, but I'll know they're there. So it's time to prepare for the moment of truth, the pressure test. So the first job here, the 1/4 inch spigot that we put on there, I drill that through, put some bungs that I made into the 3/8 BSP fittings, and we can then put a hose with a blanking bung in it on the radiator outlet, and that means we're almost sealed. Final job, radiator cap, and the observant among you will see that this radiator cap is left-handed for some unknown reason. Here we are, we plug on the air line and let's go for it. Well, this is it, the moment of truth. I've put some blanking plugs in there. I haven't drilled these two, so they're airtight. I've put our air line onto the 6mm feed because I've already got a pipe for pressure testing, and basically I'm going to pressurize it until the rad cap releases, which is the pressure release, and it should be about 20 psi, and if I've got this right, the air will stay in. So let's see. Well, that's 35 psi and the radiator cap has not blown off there, so that cap is dodgy, but the tank seems good. And it hasn't gone a balloon shape, so all of our ribs and the baffles and everything else seem to have worked very well. I'm pretty happy with that, except for that radiator cap. Last check, go outside and spray it with the soapy water and just have a quick check around the bubbles while it's pressurised. It's all good. So with that done, we can make the final mounting brackets. Just simple aluminium plates, a bit of bending, a couple of holes, they'll all be good. there we are, that's our tank done. So I just finished welding those two brackets on, and I've drilled the holes in the car to mount it, and I've drilled through those two now because we need those clear. And all I've done is I've gone over it now and I've just given it a very quick rub over with some steel wool, and that just tidies it up. So I think that's a pretty nice job. That's taken all day to do, but I'm very pleased with it. The only thing I changed on the welder was that when I started doing these baffle plates, because they were a big sheet onto an edge as opposed to an edge and an edge, is that I put the main amps up to 125 and the initial up to 130, that's all, just to give it a bit more of a kick. So that's it. That is how you make an aluminium header tank, 3mm aluminium, and we've welded it up, we've got the baffles in, we've got all the fittings and everything else done on this. So we'll mount it in the car, and hopefully it'll last longer than the Ford one, which lasted several hours. So we hope you've enjoyed the journey on this. I have. As I say, it's been self-indulgent, but I don't care at the end of it all. I'm doing this for me and Leon, and we've enjoyed doing this tank and being able to take the time to do it properly and hopefully come up with what looks like a professional job. So if you want to do it at home, you can. We've given you the welding settings, you've seen how we formed it, how we shaped it and how we welded it, and the order we did it all in. So dig out and give it a go. It can be done. A professional would do it in about half an hour, I'm sure, but there you go. I'm not a professional welder. So thank you very much for watching. I'm going to go and put this on the car and get it sorted out. Please subscribe, please share, and who knows what we'll be doing next. Probably drifting. Cheers.